Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to tonight's session with Anton Chaitkin. And here goes my bird clock. It must be 7 o'clock then. Okay, Tony Chaitkin is well known to anybody. He is a wonderful author. His expertise is in American history. He has written many books, many articles over the years, over his long career. He just recently published his second volume of Who We Are, which I recommend highly to everybody to read. And he's currently working on his third volume. But, okay, as with any good historian, Tony gets, what should I say, rudely interrupted by current events that he feels compelled to respond to. And we are very happy that Tony is meeting with us tonight and answering questions after his short presentation on the topic of this Venezuelan intervention by Donald Trump. And I'm calling it intervention. I think Tony has other words for it. With not much else to say, welcome, Tony, and let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Magdalena. That's great. We are in the 250th year of the United States, 1776 to 2026. And we have had the ideals of the country and the successes that come from those ideals repeated again and again throughout our history. Not all the time. You could say not even a majority of the time, perhaps, although in many ways it was a majority. But we are going to have to realize that we are a nation of builders, and that's our historic identity. Our betrayers have been different from that. They represent a different hostile system of values of imperialism. And I'd say that we have a destiny to rebuild the United States with physical systems, with skills, with transport, with new factories, with new power and energy, raise incomes, rebuild families, rebuild cities. This all to younger people, this sounds like science fiction. I'm going to get into a little bit of some instances of our continued, repeated revival of being able to do these things in the past. But we also have to help do this kind of building around the world, as we did when we built the United States, especially in the period when we had the power to do that, late 19th century and into the 20th century. This is our only prospect for survival. We're going to have mutual benefit and cooperation with other countries to do this. That's our historical identity in the United States. Now, Donald Trump campaigned for protectionism, that is against free trade, and as an anti-war candidate in 2016. And raising those issues would be a part of a serious challenge to the enemy system if a president would present a vision to the population, a vision of the future, a vision of the country fulfilling our mission. If he would actually mobilize the country to challenge the system in that way. But the Venezuela attack and the whole system of where you say adversaries are doing this or that against us betrays our U.S. interests, not just a betrayal of what I think are the ideals and principles of the country. This is a vital consideration. That is, this was a betrayal of the needs and the really everything about the survival issues and interests of our country and our people. Anyone who wants the United States population to follow them in what they are proposing or to follow them in their criticism must show this vision of the future that's based on what we've done in the past. It has to be a sweeping vision of what the future has to hold inside and outside of our country. What's our role in the world? And to show that their people's jobs and their security and their safety, their standard, everything about their standard of living is betrayed when we don't do that. Unless you're showing that, you are in a sense you're going along with the betrayal because it's empty rhetoric. You have to speak to the people of the country in that way. And of course, that would blow past the two-party sellout, this uniparty system. All right, now, if you go on to whitehouse.gov, the White House website, you'll see something unintentionally hilarious there. It's about how the Democrats, it's a defense of the attack on Venezuela. It shows that it quotes from Democrats demanding the ouster of Maduro. One of them is quoted, is a Florida Democrat, progressive Democrat congressman, is quoted bringing up the wonderful price put on the head of Maduro for $100 million. This is a Democrat. And so the headline that Trump puts on this, quote after quote from Democrats formerly calling for the ouster of Maduro, he says that they demanded this ouster and then they mourned when Trump did it. This is barbarism. Now, who started the attack on Venezuela? Well, in a sense, it goes way back. But in recent times, it was Barack Obama, president in 2014 and 2015, put on sanctions on Venezuela. And he said that that country was a threat, or its leaders were a threat to our national security. So before I go into this now, you have to understand that Anglo-Americans designed this aggressive policy to betray the United States and our interests. That's the history of this, and that's the history of our country. So the talk has been about terrorists or narco-terrorists threatening us. I would like you to consider what was the worst instance, the worst case of armed terrorists attacking the United States en masse in our history. Can anybody say what that was? Or just leave off the word terrorist. What was the greatest armed attack inside our country, against our country?
Well,
Who did that?
9/11 is blamed on foreigners, and I considered it an inside job for the record.
Okay, uh, go back to 1861 and the attack on Fort Sumter and the buildup of 100,000 armed men just before that in the South. And then during the war, the British building warships in the Civil War for the South. 600,000 Americans died. This is the anti-national leaders of the slave owners, the worst terrorists against our country in our history. Now, this was a snake in our bosom. People say, well, we can't have socialists and communists or people allied to China or Russia in our hemisphere. It's our neighborhood. Well, this was right in our country. So, what was the plan of our best leaders for dealing with that, for eliminating that snake in our bosom? What would the best people say how to do it? Go to war with the South? No, we didn't want that. Lincoln didn't want it. And the best nationalist leaders didn't want it. What they proposed, both before the Civil War and after, when you still had the same racist aristocracy in charge in the South, what they proposed, these are the people who built our country proposed this, the ones who built the railroads and the canals and the steel mills. They proposed that the United States had to change the South by industrializing it, change the character of the people of the South with modern jobs and high incomes, and bring in connections to the outside world that would bring in real literacy and enhancement of skills. That would eliminate the plantation system. It would raise the wage levels. It would completely undercut this backwardness that threatened us and continue to threaten us into our time. All right, this evil backwardness of the racist element, which was a leftover from the British Empire, the colonial system also that went into the later times. So this is an analogy for how we have to deal with problems like this. Well, keep that in mind. Franklin Roosevelt had a program which was partly realized in the Tennessee Valley Authority, where he built up along this river valley dams and a whole set of industry and communities which used the energy and used the new skills for raising the civilization level in a large part of the South. This was not didn't go through to its full realization in the South that we could have done, but it was copied in many ways in other countries. It was certainly taken official note of in China, and in many ways spread to there, and very directly by American representatives over there. So this was something to change the horrible backwardness, the threatening backwardness, the anti-national backwardness of the South. That was our national program. This was the core idea in the good neighbor policy of Franklin Roosevelt. That is, that we should be good neighbors towards Latin America in particular and other countries. So there is a direct background for this that will instruct us about what the heck is going on with the United States and Latin America. Go back to the 19th century, and for all of this that goes from the 19th century to our century, which I'm going to do very briefly, you have to know this history, or you are blind for Venezuela. You have no clue about this. And this background, by the way, is known to the most senior policymakers. Maybe not to Trump, I don't know. But senior adult policymakers. Starts with Peru. I'm starting in the 1870s. Peru had the ambition to industrialize all of South America. They built railroads across the Andes Mountains. They nationalized their nitrates based on guano. The British warships deployed backing the Chile army to invade. Our President Garfield and Secretary of State Blaine were pro-Peru. Garfield was murdered. Peru's president was kidnapped. Blaine, the Secretary of State, went ahead and called everybody in South America to a peace conference. Then he was fired 2 weeks later when they started coming, accepting the invitations. The guy that fired him was the new president, who was a Wall Street lawyer, Chester Arthur. Took over because the other president was assassinated. 1890, we got a second chance. Blaine was Secretary of State again. He called another conference and set up this all the countries came. And it was based on the idea that we have to have peace in South America, Mexico, and US. We have to have equality between the countries and respect. Then we will all have security. That conference set up a railroad commission to build railroads between New York and Argentina, and for the countries to build the railroads all across South America and Mexico. And they all started doing it. At the same time, Congress passed a tariff, McKinley tariff, he was in Congress then, which had reciprocity. That meant that we make agreements that our high tariffs, which exclude cheap products coming in from Britain and other countries that are dumped here to try to destroy our industry, we're going to protect ourselves with high tariffs, but we will have adjusted tariffs with Latin America, and they will work with us for the mutual benefit of our protective system. And it will be a wall protecting all of us from the dumping of the imperialists from overseas. There was, and at the time it was referred to as a Zollverein for the Americas, based on the ideas of Friedrich List. And I have a wonderful quote I'm putting in the book that I'm writing now from one of these Austrian sort of proto-fascists of the time, worrying that this would exclude England, and that it was a terrible example to the world. So we sent out survey teams all over South America and Army engineers. And so did these other countries. They all had their own surveys. McKinley became president end of the 19th century. And he had this policy for building this railroad and for building up our own industries. And they were fabulously built up in America. We were leading the world in everything. Germany was second. Japan was third, and Russia was fast coming up. But the US was working with Russia to build their railroad across Siberia. And especially that we wanted them to build in China, and we were building up the Trans-Siberian Railroad that was going through China. This was jobs, jobs, jobs for Americans. Steel mills, machines, air brakes, all kind of a new electrical equipment. And imagine what that would have meant building these railroads in South America. My God, across thousands of miles, many lines all over the place. So what happened? Mexico wanted to participate. And so the nationalist leader in Mexico, a couple of them, one of them, the governor of Nuevo León, set up a project, and the United States supplied the components to build the greatest steel mill ever built in Latin America. It was built in Monterrey, Mexico in 1900. It's called the Monterrey Foundry, Fundidora de Monterrey. And you can look it up, but you won't find it in history books, just in particular references. You can look it up on Wikipedia if you like to, but most history books are written by the Anglo-Americans, right? Or their stooges. So they just omit this. We also built one of the foundational steel mills in Russia. And this was followed up by Americans going to India to build the great foundational steel mill of India in the early 1900s. A guy named Julian Kennedy from Pittsburgh was the designer. And the Tata family were the financiers. That's what we were doing around the world. We also had the oil industry started up in Mexico to provide thick, unrefined petroleum that could go right in as the fuel for locomotives. Edward Doheny who was doing this, started the Mexican oil industry, had already done this when he founded the oil industry in Los Angeles. So the British-backed Teddy Roosevelt faction forced the country into a war. They had the connections to the newspapers and to academia and the backing of the British. The people around Prince, the guy that would be King Edward VII. And they forced McKinley to surrender to them, to have a war with Spain for having the United States go in and conquer Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. This was disastrous to what we were trying to accomplish. As a result of this, you got the Boxer Rebellion. People in China thought, well, the United States is no different from these other countries. And you got people renewed suspicious of the United States. Teddy Roosevelt became then the president by the sudden assassination of McKinley. And Teddy Roosevelt built a canal through Panama against the South Americans. It was for US and British warships to go and police the world. And no railroads ever crossed that canal. There were not even any bridges across it to begin with. This was, and then he said, he deliberately destroyed the respect for America that was building up in South America after the disaster of these slave owners that had made war on Mexico and other adventures against trying to build a Southern empire. We had to rebuild our influence, which we were doing when we were building up our country and helping build other countries. If we're just making war and conquering territories and stealing things like the British, then we lose all of our influence. We are sowing the seeds of hatred. We are making enemies. Was that the point for Teddy Roosevelt? No, he had no point. His point was that he admired war and he hated the American nationalists. He was born in the United States, but his mother's family were some of the leading enemies of the United States in the Confederate service and the Confederate Secret Service. So FDR. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt canceled all of this program that McKinley had had for South America, all of the railroad building. Got us into World War I. Franklin Roosevelt had a good neighbor policy. Now let's look at that in relation to Venezuela. The president of Mexico, Lázaro Cárdenas, in 1938, nationalized the petroleum properties of the Shell Oil Company of Britain and Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, an American company, American-based. Instead of invading there, we did not invade Mexico and we did not put sanctions on. Instead of that, we had wonderful negotiations with Mexico, facilitated by the anti-imperial ambassador to Mexico that we had at the time. And we came to a good bargain with them. Then there would be some payment to these oil companies, but in general, Mexico would be able to set up its own oil company and use its own national resources, the Pemex company. British didn't do that. And Mexico broke relations with the United Kingdom at that time, in 1938. Following that, we had a world war, and Mexico was the ally of the United States. And guess what? They had a big steel mill in Monterrey. No other country in Latin America had a steel mill like that. And they produced the steel for weapons for our side in World War II and saved American lives. The steel mill that we built in Russia and rebuilt under the Soviets produced weapons for our Soviet allies in World War II, even though America never endorsed or wanted to put up with communism. It was never the point. Just like the Tsarist system, that's not the point. We'll do our job in the world. We're going to represent our system. We're going to show people what a free country can do and what a country that is looking out for its own interests, even if that means having protective tariffs, even if that means that you make agreements between countries that go deliberately against a global system pretended to be the world system by the empires. So go up, fast forward now to our century. President Obama sanctioned Venezuela. Now, what's the scheme behind that? That's not just about Venezuela. Before he put those sanctions on Venezuela, there was a crisis in our government. It was in 2012. And the crisis was that the United States Senate pressed to investigate the dope cartels and the murder of people by overdoses and by the dope gangs in both countries, Mexico and US. The US Senate investigated what was a narco state in Mexico. What were the cartels in Mexico? What was behind that? How did they get so powerful in a world where you have such huge, powerful bankers and military men and everything else? How did these guys get so powerful? Our US Senate investigated it. Senator Levin of Michigan was the head of this subcommittee investigating. And they came to a conclusion and published a book, a pamphlet, about the kingpin of the drug bankers, HSBC, which was the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Been in the dope business for, since the 1860s. And they were laundering the money for the drug cartels of Mexico and also various other terrorists around the world, according to the shenanigan policy of intelligence agencies. But this was particular sensational documentation by our government of the reality of this narco terrorism, the gangs, the murderers, and the drugs coming into the United States and how it was financed. Obama directed his administration to give a complete pass to HSBC. They got a fine and was and no jail time and no consideration that their license should be revoked. And since Russia was investigating an arm of the HSBC bank at that time for their corruption in Russia, Obama said, what Russia is doing in that case is a violation of human rights. They jailed the accountant for that arm of the HSBC in Russia, Magnitsky. And that must be a violation of human rights. And so the administration and its allies, and the allies of the Anglo-Americans and the European Union and what have you, NATO, put through our Congress the Magnitsky Act to sanction Russia. So this was right before, and Obama applied this against Russia. This was right before the Venezuela sanctions. So are we talking now about the narco state? If you're talking about that and you're not talking about our offshore banking system, it has a history with the mafia. It has a history of all kinds, but its direct purpose is money laundering all over the world in various forms and avoidance of laws. That's the enemy. That's our greatest enemy in so many ways. The system is based on that. So this is betrayal. So let's go through just list the betrayals. The Southerners tried to start a slave empire. The Southern anti-national people to attack Mexico, Central America, and Cuba and spread slavery there to get a base for attacking the United States. It was only partly successful. They never managed to conquer Cuba. Then they attacked the United States. They built up an army doing these other things. And Teddy Roosevelt built the canal against Latin America. He lost our jobs. He lost our security. He got us in two world wars. He was actually campaigning for the war that he got, World War I, and he is speaking in terms of like Hitler. He was followed by in not too long later, his distant cousin Franklin Roosevelt, who in the beginning admired Teddy Roosevelt. He changed sides. Did Trump change sides? Could be. I don't know. I don't. Does it sound terrible to say I don't care? I don't think that's the issue. What he's doing now is directed by the Anglo-American system of our enemies. It's part of a long-standing crusade against our system and against our interests. Dulles, John Foster, but especially his brother, Alan, betrayed Franklin Roosevelt after Roosevelt's death. We had a series of coups d'etats. One of them was in Guatemala, where there were anti-national base there with the imperial interests of the banana company and so forth. Was the overthrow of the government in Guatemala in 1954 or in Iran, were those overthrows in the interest of the United States? No. Nobody could ever convince a person today in a debate that was the case. You had to have a really terrible, a frightened population to go along with these things. 1954. We had the Bay of Pigs. It was designed to trap and eventually have the capability of assassinating our president, John Kennedy. We had the Contras, where the people went into so-called fight communism in Central America. Was that for our interests? What was the result of all these things? Oh, and they also worked for giving weapons to the mullahs in Iran. What, after having betrayed the people of Iran back in the 1950s by overthrowing the democratic government there, betrayed our interests. What was the result of all these interventions? Not interventions to, you've heard the word nation building? Terrible hijacking of a term. It's supposed to be what we're doing in Afghanistan. Oh my God. If destroying a nation is called nation building. No, we did nation building, but it was always with the permission and cooperation of other countries who were sovereign. We were jealous of our sovereignty, like we're not now in the world system that Trump has surrendered to with this kind of shenanigan. And we were jealous of other people's sovereignty as well. So the British Empire, are they unhappy with this attack? Some people say that Trump took down the British Empire interests. I've heard that recently. So you had this memo on BBC. You can go look it up if you haven't already. It's on there now, a few days ago. A memo they sent to their staff, their journalistic staff, not to use the word kidnap. Use the word capture or if necessary, seize, but do not say kidnap. Oh, why are the British supporting this? So I would close by saying, ask not what the bad guys are scheming about. Ask what is our side in history, the Republic. How would our side solve these problems? When you are looking into these things, do not be tragically foolish by adopting a Hollywood action movie analysis based on what the bad guys are trying to do. You've lost the sense of nobility, of purpose, that a very important minority of Americans have always maintained since the birth of this country, and still do, many of them. Certainly not a majority, but that nobility of purpose is what we're all about. And it's the only way to solve these problems. And that's it.
Thank you, Tony. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions, discussion. If you have a question, I did see a comment by Jamie. So Jamie, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. And anybody else who wants to raise a hand, Bruce is next, yes? Okay, so Jamie first and then Bruce. And then we take it from there. Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Go
my
ahead.
question I proposed was with regard to the connections of the British East India Company. and the HSB Bank that you mentioned. I was wondering if you could maybe help sort of fill in any gaps there and any related connections to that particular band of thieves, I guess, as well.
And Jamie is talking?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, the HSBC came into the opium trafficking at a time after the mutiny in India and the change in governance for the British Empire in Asia. It was now to be governed by the British government directly. Queen Victoria was supposed to be the head of that. She became the empress. So this bank, I believe, started up in 1865. It could have been earlier, and it's clearly based on dope banks that had gone before. And in 1865, really just as earlier, opium was illegal. And they had renounced in England the right to produce to sell opium there. In many, I don't remember the details of this, but they went ahead with this opium anyway for many, many, many years. It went strongly into the 20th century, and the people involved with this would get into other drugs like cocaine, and obviously in other parts of the world. But this bank continued in this business. This was, of course, the famous finding of the book Dope Incorporated, produced by the LaRouche organization and the Executive Intelligence Review quite a long time ago. That the finding that they asked the question, the right question. When did the British banking system and the British Empire get out of the narcotics business? And the answer was, oh, this is surprising. They never did. The same bank is still in the business. And then in 2012, it was still doing it. How it's so far-fetched that they would keep the same institution. And you can follow if you look into the history of the bank, you can follow them in their adventures in the Middle East in different places and their relationship to various narcotics and insurrectionist and anti-national movements and dictatorships and wars. So it has a fabulous history, and it's not the East India Company, but it certainly grew out of that complex of the East India Company, which was at the heart of the British Empire, going back to the late 1700s.
Thank you very much, Anton. Appreciate your response.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Bruce, you raised your hand, and then after Bruce is Peter.
Thank you. I want to compliment you, Anton, on titling your book series Who We Are, because your comments tonight about don't focus on what the enemy is doing, paraphrasing, focus on, I'm going to say, who we were or what we want. And therein is the world of difference. The public discourse, especially on social media, which is such a huge part of where discourse happens anymore, is complaints. It's like children blaming each other. Republicans blame the Democrats. The Democrats blame the Republicans. The citizenry blames the mainstream media and politics in general. And lost in the fog, as lost as this true history you bring out, is what do you want? That's probably what an adult would first ask upset teenagers or upset children who are bickering about this, that, and the other thing. And now I see on the temple of Apollo at Delphi, know thyself. Who are you? Who we are, the title of your book. Would you talk about
Socrates.
the importance of focusing on these kind of things?
Yeah, well, um, uh, just to amplify that, until recently, until this recent period following the multiple murders of the 1960s, until that time, and to a certain extent into the 60s, didn't just die with JFK, but let's say up to 1970 or something, all the way back and all the way forward up to then. Everything that was important in terms of advancements of living standards and let me put it this way, science and industry and technology driven uh, increases in living standards. Everything important that was an advance for that was related to American intervention in the world. Not intervention, not political intervention, not military intervention. I'm talking about sharing technology. I'm talking about expertise. I'm talking also about just advice on how you build up protection for your country and for integrity of your borders and things like that. We were the champions of building up national sovereignty. And that the way you build up national sovereignty is to industrialize and have electricity. Now it's to have high-speed trains and space program and nuclear power and water projects and educational systems and health systems that are national projects and have to have international cooperation. But we did things on a very large scale. We were so proud of it. The best image of Americans is the American worker who was so skilled and so happy when he would be overseas, maybe in Peru or some other place, and he's receiving a shipment on a boat of the parts for a huge machine, for a locomotive or some other machine. And he knows how to put these things together and install them for this country. And he's so proud of himself, of his country, and of the people that he's working with there. And he sees how these other countries are so capable. My God, every country that I'm into when I'm doing this, he might say to himself, they had their own civilization here. God, I didn't know about that. Thousands of years ago, they had civilizations here in South America, or here in China, or here wherever he's doing that. So the effect that Americans had on the world and the reputation of the United States, beyond being stupid, saloon inhabiting gunslingers in the West. We had a different image. We were builders.
And that's very congruent with the idea that we're allowing our nation to function as someone we don't want to be. And to say it positively is to know your own rights, know thyself, to know your own rights, and to know the only way I can secure them is if I'm willing to die for your rights. And then I want for you what I want for myself, the ability to improve my living standards, the ability to improve everything that I do, to improve the quality of the life of my family. I have to contribute to that improvement to my town, my community, my county, my state, my nation, and it just goes around the world like that. And now that's the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do to yourself. And that's the documentation of that you provide with the history that you provide, which is a revelation to me and so many raised in the public schools with the curriculum created by the Anglo-American, Alliance. Can
Well,
I
we
talk
have.
for 2 or 3 more hours praising your work, Anton,
Okay,
please?
well, don't do that.
Okay.
But we have to
Thank you
be.
for. Okay, I'm sorry for
I'm sorry. I want to,
interrupting.
but we have to be careful that we are demonstrating uh, things in the interest of our people in a hard-nosed way. The mandate of the president and of a congressman is to take care of the interests of our people. They are not in office to take care of the interests of other people.
Or corporations.
Well, that's well, obviously, but then you can't take care of your people if you're in the pocket or afraid of larger financial interests and so forth. But it can be easily demonstrated, and it is demonstrated every day by what happened again and again, that unless you are cooperating and serving mutual interest while you're protecting your people, while you're building up the US, unless you're doing it in cooperation with others who are also fighting the globalists and the imperialists, you will not serve your people. And in fact, you have again and again not only the failure overseas and the blowback and terrorist movements are rising where you've lost our influence. Where is our influence now? Do we have influence in Venezuela? We have a subterranean networks promoting different things, but when did we really have influence in these places? When we were providing shared technology, when we were providing an example of prosperity for ourselves. If we say to people in Venezuela, you are responsible for flooding us with narcotics. Somebody wrote in here about fentanyl, that it's a terrible destroyer. It's flooding our country. Well, is there any room in that discussion for the failure within our country of a way of life where people are become empty and desperate and shells and horrified by the world, and they're taking dope? How do you cope with that? The first step is to say we made a mistake by taking down our industry and taking down our future and closing down the space program and closing our nuclear plants and having an education that's against everything that we stood for in the past that was good. So our leadership has to put our people first. And when they betray those people by doing the foreign adventures that Donald Trump denounced in his campaign in 2016, then they're obviously going to get themselves in trouble with the American public, which is not going to follow along with this stuff.
We
Go
have
ahead.
a number of people who raised their hand and signed up. Peter is next, okay? And then after Peter comes Rohit, if I say that correctly. So Peter, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madalena. Good evening, Anton.
Hi, Peter.
So I have a question. What is the provenance of asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street with respect to past entities such as JP Morgan Chase, Rockefellers, Lazard Fred, Brown Brothers, Harriman, Rothschild, HSBC, Baring Brothers, etc.? Is the asset manager a new iteration of old crown corporations?
it is a new phase of a system. As a financial system, this whole thing was introduced after the Civil War by J.P. Morgan in particular. And it included, types of speculation and building up of little empires of Wall Street people that went way back. But the internationalization of our financial system begins with J.P. Morgan in the 1870s. It was directly against national economics, the nationalists, as I show in volume 2 of this book. So when you get into the 20th century, there was a big change in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. A lot of it was directed from Britain by Margaret Thatcher. Other things came in through our Federal Reserve. But the change was in shifting the whole emphasis of finance to non-productive use of capital and credit. And the amassing of gigantic fortunes based on non-productive and in many ways destructive activities. Everybody knows about the defense establishment and so forth. Yes, some of these companies in Wall Street now invest in established industries in the United States, but they are not industrial. They are not pro-industrial because they have overseen the deliberate disintegration of our advanced heavy industry in the United States and Western Europe, particularly in the United States and Britain. So these are forms of monopoly and of power that are a feature of the international financial system. The big change in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s at different times was to set up offshore banking, which was completely unaccountable as the world banking system, essentially. And then you have these huge financial interests within that. It is international, and it's based on international system. It doesn't depend on anything in America. And it could be, these guys could be completely destroyed if they decided purely on some sort of financial interest to back a renaissance of American manufacturing and seriously went after it. They would become a target for the system, which is international. They don't do that. They're not into that. They're not into American interests.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Rohit tells me that he does not have a mic, so he wants me to read the question that he had written. Okay.
Who is that?
Rohit. Rohit. I hope I'm
Okay.
saying this correctly. Okay. He
Yeah.
says, one thing everyone noticed when the operation took place was the lack of any air defense activation. What are your thoughts that this is a pre-negotiated effort to rebrand the Venezuelan regime in order to lift sanctions and facilitate trade with the USA? The European and Israeli pick Machado has also been sidelined by the administration in favor of the existing regime. So that's the question that he had written.
Bizarre, huh? I think that's a mistaken premise. That when you let me focus on the question of language. According to people in the Trump camp, language doesn't matter. What matters is that you get something done, and it's okay to use language that is not involves threats, that involves vulgarity, that involves a vocabulary and a terminology that is inconsistent with a republic. It's a gangster talk. If you go back in our history, you see beautiful language from our best leaders. Actually, they were blunt at different times, but the bluntness was never it was never the gutter. It was bluntness to cut through horrifying lying. People like Lincoln or George Washington, for that matter, or Franklin Roosevelt. They spoke in very lofty language, just as our Constitution, our Declaration was in lofty language. We had a diction in our country of the best leadership. It doesn't mean rhetoric. So it's possible to forecast that this is not going to work. How? Because you're not mobilizing the population according to the necessary vision. What would be our relation to Venezuela and Colombia and these other countries that we are now indicting as narco states? What would be our relation to them if we wanted to be successful? We would be engaged with regional partners, Mexico and all these other countries, many of whom have the same problem, for a large-scale rebuilding of civilization. If you think, well, that's wonderful, that was a past era, now we have to protect ourselves. And people who think that way cannot remember when the United States itself ever built anything in our country. Not anything serious, not anything new, like cities, like new inventions, such as electricity or the space program. When we did things successfully, now we have data centers. Is that building something to improve the population? Any population? No, not really. It's for war largely. So you're not being realistic if you think that by acting like a berserk pirate, you are somehow secretly serving the interest of the people you're attacking and serving the interest of the people that somehow you're working with back home. Who are you serving? Oh, and no, it says that the Israelis have been sidelined. Tell that to Pete Hegseth and people in the Pentagon. Tell that to somebody asked about Christian dominionists and bellicose evangelicals. I don't think they're running policy. They're useful in some ways to the people running this bad policy. But anyway, I think that what was the question is based on a false premise, that there's nothing in our interest that could possibly be served by acting like a pirate, by acting like a mass murderer.
Yeah. Yeah, well said.
Oh, he's not really a mass murderer. He's just acting like one. Well, I don't believe you can say that Donald Trump is a mass murderer. I agree with you if you say that. I don't think he's a mass murderer. I don't think he wants to be. maybe he wants to scare everybody into doing the right thing, but he's not.
We have Sam next, and then Ian, and then we have quite a lineup here. So
Go
Sam,
ahead.
Ian, Robert, Gerald. Robert has another one. Let's see with go with Sam first.
Hey, Tony.
Hi, Sam.
I was wondering, have you seen Susan Kokinda's take on all of this on Venezuela?
I haven't listened to her more than a few words, but I know what she's about. I have some a lot of background knowledge about. I know
Okay.
what her group says.
I'll try and give a brief summary, and then I'll ask you for your opinion because
Go ahead.
I do agree with you. Like I despise how some in the administration are trying to justify this by saying that, oh, well, it's the Monroe Doctrine. And, the Monroe Doctrine is the complete opposite
Mhm.
of this. And really, um, you know, what this is the Roosevelt corollary, of course,
The
of
Teddy
Teddy
Roosevelt
Roosevelt.
corollary. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, and I really like Susan Kokinda's analysis a lot of the time. So I'm kind of torn here because she mentions the ties between Tony Blair and Britain and Hugo Chavez in the 90s, and how Hugo Chavez talks glowingly of Tony Blair and says he's a follower of his beliefs. And of course, you mentioned the British narco trafficking and a large cocaine presence in Venezuela. And so her analysis seems to be that this is some kind of asymmetric warfare against the British Empire and against these elements of narco trafficking in this sort of dark underbelly of the global political system,
Mhm.
and that you can't she gives a bunch of quotes from people like who was it? Was it John Bolton? And there was some British analysis as well, showing that or saying that this is not a regime change. This is not a normal regime change. And as somebody mentioned earlier, that their candidate Machado, Trump immediately came out and said, no, it's not going to be Machado. So yeah, I'm just a little bit torn in what to believe about all this, and would welcome hearing your thoughts on it.
Well, I think the less important thing is the angle of, which is true, that the British and British banking and British intelligence has a lot to do with setting up narco terrorism in South America. Absolutely, that's true. And so the British also were instrumental in destroying Russia by the Japanese attack and trying to destroy that country. And then they sent troops in against the Bolsheviks when the Bolsheviks took over. So which side were they on? Were they against, they were on both sides, right? But more important than that setting up of terrorism and instability and chaos and anti-civilizational activities. Remember, dope is a mind killer. It's against civilization. And if you are trying to lower civilization to going back to I don't know, the 8th century or something in Europe, or times of great trouble, so that people are so defenseless that you can just do whatever you want with them. That's the imperial system. Yes. more important than that is that our system and our success has always depended upon peace. We always succeeded in building up our country with a goal of peace in mind. The greatest advances in our country internally were in the first industrialization was in the 1820s into the 30s. No foreign wars. The greatest advances were in the from the end of the Civil War until 1898. No foreign wars. We built ourselves up to be the world leader. Again, we had two leaders who fought for a world of peace and cooperation, gave their lives in a sense for that, which is Franklin Roosevelt and John Kennedy. And I believe that Eisenhower would have done it if he wasn't surrounded by these Nazis, the Dulles and others. And Truman the same way. Truman wouldn't have done this, but certainly that was our American advances were based on a vision of peace and cooperation with other countries. So when you say that we are going to attain our objectives by war, we have national objectives to defend our interests internationally by invading another country. I don't care what you call it, kill 80 or 100 people and kidnap the president. You're invading the country and you're doing war against them. I don't care about the scale of it. That's pretty big scale when you kidnap the president. What is it that you are conveying about America's role in the world by doing that? What should people think about those who make war, unprovoked war? Mm-hmm. Every country has something that we could have a gripe against. Every country has a bad government in one way or another, especially our European allies. What are people supposed to make of this? What we did in Venezuela is illegal by every definition of law, every possible definition of law. Probably the one that really is important to me is the Nuremberg Tribunal, where they decided that the greatest crime committed by the Nazis was starting World War II. And according to the treaties and laws agreed to by the powers before that, starting a war was illegal. You could defend yourself from foreign attack because we had a system of national sovereignty in the world. At least that was the legal system. It's still the legal system. There's nothing legal about starting an aggressive war. To me, it's as simple as that. If you try to make it into we are secretly serving our own interests and defeating our enemies. Oh, we're going against secret things done by Tony Blair and Chavez. Well, wait a minute. What about the not so secret things being done every day by the international banking system? Why don't you challenge that? Why don't you reinstate Glass-Steagall? Why don't you have national credits? Why don't you build infrastructure in the United States and these other countries? The thing that the British hate the most. What do they hate the most? No. Heavy industry for the world, so that people that are now peasants or starving become skilled workers in modern industry. That's what the British Empire hates the most. Do that and make that your public goal. And then you don't have to get into endless arguments about the Paris Climate Accords. Just build a heavy industry. Make it modern. It doesn't belch smoke into the air. You don't have to do that. But you have to have electricity. You have to have fresh water. You have to build huge things. You have to have tremendous cooperative projects. No one person or a little firm can do that. You have to have countries involved. So it's so stupid to say that the attacks against this country or that country are being done. Oh, this is different from the yellow cake uranium in Iraq. That was fake. This is real. What's real? Well, behind the scenes, things are happening that you're not privy to. Don't worry, we know all about it. Well, what about the fact that we don't have credit going to build up our jobs in America? That's something that everybody knows about. We have trade that goes against our people, and that same trade goes against those people, makes them poor. They're poor all over Central America. They're poor in many parts of Latin America. Poor people get into terrorism. Poor people get into drug pushing. That's their excuse for becoming pirates.
Mm.
What's Donald Trump's excuse?
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Ian says that he does not have a mic and he doesn't have video, so he wants me to read the question, which I will do right now. So he says, can you speak to US aid and how that was involved with the elections in Venezuela, in that it swayed those elections? So that's from Ian.
No, I don't know anything about that. I don't even know what elections he's talking about.
Okay. Then we have Robert. Robert?
Hi there.
Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the question, I mean, it's obvious that this is wrong. It is obvious also that the US government did aggressive attacks on regimes, as you emphasized before. The difference here is that it's open, that it's said, that it's not hidden at all. And, you know, the big question is why? And I just give you a hypothesis, and please tell me what you think about it. I think that narratives for a one world government are pre-framed right now because, like, the big government of the United States just do as if they would run a province, you know.
I'm sorry, say it again. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So for me, there are two aspects to it which push this action towards a pre-framing of creating a world government.
Okay.
One aspect is that it could be the start of a series of takeovers, followed by Canada, you know, Greenland, integrating Mexico into a kind of North American or all-American community similar to the European Union. So this is could you know, it's a way of thinking which is induced in a way. And the other aspect in terms of pre-framing is that there is a government in the United States which would then run another country, you know, run a province. I mean, they did this in the past, but again, the difference is that this is open now, that they're telling it, and that people might get used to it in a way, saying, okay, this is how it works, this is how the world is run, so we will have a central government, and maybe like in 10 or 20 years, or even earlier, then this will move from Washington to the UN, and everybody will be happy that it's not the United States anymore who will run all provinces, but, you know, a central government, which is not just the United States.
Well, I think that in a sense, you're right about one thing, that this is part of getting people used to war to achieve purposes, and speaking in a way that claims that it's serving our national purposes. I think that I mean, I could get into more deeper about how none of the previous coup d'etats or takeovers or regime changes have ever served the interests of the people of our country. But I do think that the most important part of this is that historically is that you have to start with what Trump represented politically. We had a period of American decline from the late 1960s. Decline of our industry, decline of our reputation, decline of the moral fiber of the country. Even while we were projecting military power overseas. And so Trump came up at the same time as, a little bit later than Bernie Sanders. And some other people came up earlier that were criticizing this decline, this deindustrialization. He was the most direct to hit on certain aspects of the world system. China, Russia, these other countries that were coming up at the time, that's now the BRICS, maybe they're not completely part of that world system, but the world system projected by the globalists. So Donald Trump attacked two aspects of that system. The first thing he attacked was free trade. The idea that no country should be allowed to interfere with world trade for its own interests by putting up tariff barriers, by controlling credit, by controlling the flow of funds, things like that. That should be illegal. Free trade means that you have a global system or a global empire that forbids countries from protecting themselves because they're interfering with the freedom of money. That's called free trade. And Trump said, this is not serving our interests.
Oh, it seems we are having technical problems. On my screen, Tony is frozen, and I can't hear him. Tony, can you hear us?
Uh-oh. Yeah, I can hear you. Did you hear what I said?
You got cut
No?
off. You got cut
All right.
off. Okay.
I'll give you a short. Trump attacked the aspects of the international system, the global system, with attacking free trade and attacking war. War is part of that system, the enemy system. Peace is part of our American system.
Oh, we are not hearing you again.
It's
We are experiencing technical difficulties, Tony. Can you hear us? Hello?
all right.
Hello, Tony?
Yeah.
We can see you again now. So maybe if you speak.
Magdalena,
Yeah.
I've got you on the telephone too, right?
Oh, it's okay, but we can hear you now. Go ahead.
It might stop. Trump challenged the system in a couple of ways. He never challenged the system as such, but he challenged free trade and war. Those are part of the enemy system. And so if he now went to war and did not stop the wars in Ukraine and Palestine, then he is clearly betraying that change. He's saying, I'm giving it up. I think that's a very simple way of looking at it. I think it's true, no matter what else is happening. Could you hear me what I just said?
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
The
Yes, we
enemy
got it.
system is war. War has always been the imperial system, and the republic is a system of peace. It by its nature, that's the idea of it, because it serves the interests of the people. And a person who is for a republic in one country is for a republic in all countries. That's the idea of the thing. It's pretty simple.
Right. Okay, Gerald, finally, it's your turn. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Hi, Tony.
Hi.
I had a question. You've kind of answered it, but I'd like to ask it anyway in case other people maybe are thinking the same thing, because I've been reading a lot of stuff about, the Venezuela situation, but especially the national security strategy that just came out, because I think Venezuela is part of that. And, people are for it, against it. They're for Trump. They're against Trump. Some people think Trump's playing 5D chess, all this stuff. But of all of this stuff on the internet I read, there was only one that caught my eye. A fellow named James Carden. I think he's a friend of Martin's. And he said, it was just a sentence, but he says, it won't work. This national security strategy, Venezuela, it won't work because it's missing one thing. It's missing a Marshall Plan for Latin America. And I thought that was interesting, but that's all he said, just one sentence. And you've kind of answered the question. You explained it in much more detail, but I just wanted your comment on that in case other people come up with this idea. We need a Marshall Plan for Latin America to straighten this out. If you could just comment on that.
Well, for one thing, the United States could never pay for a Marshall Plan for South America because the United States economy is bankrupt. We need, obviously, to have that kind of a plan, but we need first and foremost a Marshall Plan for the United States. We have to rebuild this country. The United States is bankrupt. It's been under a bankrupt international system whose aim was to bankrupt the world, was to loot the world. That's the offshore system. So if Trump is proposing a 50% increase in the US military budget, he's also, by the way, criticizing companies that are not producing military weapons fast enough in the national interest. They're just ripping off and paying their stockholders. Well, if you're proposing an extra number of trillions or whatever it is for the military budget, and the United States continues to collapse in terms of its heavy industry and its population, we're bankrupt. The bankruptcy is international because we're part of an international system. The fact that we do not cooperate to develop modern systems, such as modular nuclear energy systems, such as fusion power, such as the space program, such as high-speed trains, such as the new ways that you would do building cities and architecture and all these things, health systems. All of these things in a modern world require investment on an international scale. That's not free trade. That's not globalism. It's the use of the expertise of your country to build up the capabilities for future progress that will make it possible for you to succeed in your country. You can't succeed. One country by itself is not going to succeed. It starts by protecting and building up your own country. So while I agree that you need a huge program for developing Latin America, we have to look at what this globalist system of war and looting and stealing resources that don't belong to foreign countries. That's the system. That's neo-colonialism. It goes all the way back. Did Trump ever attack the colonial system the way John Kennedy did? The way George Washington did when he was talking about the rights of the Irish? No, not that I know of, although he challenged that system in a way that raised the hope of people who were voters. You have to keep that in mind. That's what's happened politically.
Thank you, Tony. Bruce says, thank you, Anton, for all you share and the inspiration you give to all those with ears to hear. So unfortunately, Bruce is gone. Okay. But that's what he had to say.
Let me give an update on my book.
Okay. Bruce is not here anymore. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, you can hear it and tell other people. If anybody else can hear me now, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so I'm writing the third volume. I got a few people who are really smart people to help me with research. One of them is looking assiduously into JFK and especially his anti-colonial foreign policy. One is studying Harding and has really gotten really deeply into that, and these are very smart people. And then there's another fellow that I talked to about how FDR changed, how he changed sides, how that occurred, and also about the history of nuclear science, nuclear energy for peaceful purposes before the atomic bomb project. So anyway, these are certain things that are coming up.
I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah.
I have Jamie here asking, did this happen to Venezuela as a result of any deals that were made between Venezuela and China and the friends in the BRIC nations that could have been detrimental to the petrodollar?
That could have been detrimental to the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm. I will repeat. It says,
well, I understand. I mean,
okay.
Obviously, Trump has talked about our adversaries, meaning China especially, but also the smaller ones, Cuba and Iran, etc., being involved with Venezuela. China's involved all over Latin America and all over Africa as well. If China is going to be successful in their projects, it will be beneficial to the United States. Unless we treat them as our enemy and go to war or try to burn down the continent so that nobody else could have it. If we are building ourselves, then what China's doing is in our interest, because we want to build up civilization. If we're not building anything there, if we're only taking things and demanding that people obey us, then it's not us they'll be obeying, it's the globalist system, because the United States has no influence when we act that way. The United States has influence as an independent nation that is a great accomplisher for its own people. And that's not what's being presented to the world by any recent presidents. The United States has been a failure in recent decades. The world may not see that, because a lot of the world has been in crisis, and we've brought crisis and chaos around. And the Anglo-Americans have done it in the name of the United States. So I don't think that it's realistic to talk about, I don't know, the petrodollar. You remember there was an international petrodollar that was involved in the crisis in, what was it, the early 1970s with the Middle East. And the petrodollar is a complicated system for investment internationally.
Thanks. There is Kelly has his hand raised. People are dwindling here, but
Okay.
Kelly is still here. Maybe he wants to do his
Kelly,
last question.
Yeah, sure. Considering like all the events that happened recently, Venezuela, Maduro, he's going to go to trial, blah, blah, blah. Even like the recent events in Minnesota, it's creating, like it's stirring up some kind of pot. What do you think? You think this will affect the drug problem in North America? Like, you think these events alone will it help that, or were we just gonna still continue to have a problem with narcotics?
Well, it's really a wonderful question. The LaRouche organization back in the 1970s had a crusade called the Anti-Drug Coalition, where they were talking about the mind-killing effect of narcotics and marijuana. And they were getting into the cultural aspects, that the lack of really elevating and skilled culture that we had at sometimes in the past, and that's what you needed now instead of drugs. And so we were going after those who were pushing drugs on an international level, and also pushing the destruction of our culture. This caught on to a remarkable degree, even though a lot of it was in very elevated language. Locally, we would talk to people on the street about really important things culturally and scientifically. And I find remarkable now that there is no anti-drug movement that is really attempting to catch on as a mass movement. Would it be a good idea to try to fight drugs? To involve the population in that? I think so. I think that you'd have to do it the way they did that back in the 1970s with this anti-drug coalition, to say we were meant for something higher.
Yeah.
Not to get high, but to be higher.
Yeah.
as a species, as a country,
Yeah.
and to really fight for that. If you had any kind of reference in leadership nationally, you could do that. You could do it simultaneously, putting up candidates who were for elevating the country, but specifically to shock people by going after the drug culture, which involves a huge amount of the population in one way or the other, really large scale, more than just some statistics would tell you about drug use. So I think that a crucial aspect of this is the national memory of what the United States used to represent as a very high ideal, and how successful we were in doing things. Ohio could be ground zero because Ohio was probably the most developed part of the country, especially Eastern Ohio, where they had these industries that came off of the development of Pennsylvania. And there it's a wasteland of drug use, opioids, and so forth in Ohio. As far as Maduro going to trial, that could be quite interesting in a way. I hear that he engaged a lawyer that was defending Julian Assange. And if you wanted to make something more interesting about these things, then think outside the box, how you could use these kind of things to bring up really important issues about America's rights. We have the right to have a free country, a free government, a government that doesn't spy on us, a government that serves our interest. Julian Assange brought these things out about how attacking foreign countries like Iraq also went along with attacking Americans. Just what I've been saying this whole time. All right? Isn't that right? Surveillance of Americans and attacks on foreign countries. The same lies, the same fascism. And whose benefit is it for? Not America. Well, the spooky globalists, right? What is that? It's a system and a certain kind of culture. We were meant for something better than that. So let's fight their drugs, those globalists' drugs.
Yeah, and let's not forget also the influence of media manipulation on the population, right? We
Yes.
saw that so very clearly in the whole Iraq war, and it's just advancing from there on. Yes, absolutely.
I gotta go.
Well, Tony, has been a pleasure. You're very thought-provoking, and I hope a lot of people have something to think about now. Okay. And thank you so very, very much. And hopefully we'll have a discussion like that soon again.
Okay. Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.